Oh, hello, everybody. Bruce Deno here, coming to you with the Cash Confident Podcast. And today we have the best guest ever. You're going to love her to bits. This is one of my clients, one of my dear friends, a woman who has taught me so much. Her name is Sex Coach Shannon, officially known as the Queen of the Sex Nerds. She is a certified sex and orgasm coach from New Orleans, and she is pure delight. And so today we're going to be talking about how pleasure really plays out in a full life wealth, like well-being. And we're basically just going to give you permission to enjoy, just enjoy. And you're going to hear all the juicy tidbits. So, Sex Coach Shannon, tell us a little bit about you. How did you get into your work?
Well, first, thank you for that amazing intro. Ooh, you're making me blush a little bit. Yeah, so I mean, the journey for me started really, really early. I was that kid who lived at the library, and I wanted to read all the books about things they weren't teaching us in school, and sex was a thing they weren't teaching us about in school. And so I read all those books, and then I became the kid who knew all the things. And so I've been the friend who people go to. Bless you.
They'll edit. Go ahead. Go back a second. Sorry.
Yeah.
There may be one more.
You good?
I think so. I think we're all right.
And so I've been the friend who people go to for sex advice or insights for pretty much almost my entire life, since as early as I could read. And, for a long time, that was just the friend that I was. And at some point, I discovered that sex coaching is a career that people do. And I was like, that sounds way more fun than what I'm doing for work. I'd like to do that. So I went ahead and pursued that. And here I am. Been in business for 4 years now, and it's been an absolute delight.
So good. Yeah. I love stories of women doing whatever they want for their work.
Yeah, right.
That's my favorite.
Everything. I love when women do everything they want to do and nothing they don't. That's the goal. That's the dream, right?
100%. Oh, so all right. So let's just get into it. I'm wondering what's the best question to start with. But tell us, why is pleasure so important? Why does it matter? Why would anybody hire a coach to have more pleasure? Why is it?
Oh my gosh, why wouldn't you, right?
Yeah.
I know you know. But obviously the reason my job exists is because for me and my experience moving through the world and the things I've experienced, women in particular have a hard time opening up to pleasure, accepting it, feeling good about accepting it, asking for it, defining what pleasure looks like for them. We just have a complicated relationship with pleasure. And there's so many reasons for that. There's all these kind of stories around, maybe it's a little bit selfish to want to experience pleasure, or needy, or makes you seem, like someone who, there's also a lot of shame in some circles attached to pleasure, and especially sex. And so taking some time to intentionally sit with that and go, oh, there's this whole world full of pleasure opportunities. One of them is sex. There's also many other opportunities for pleasure too, like being able to spend lots of money on flights to places you want to visit. That's a pleasure. Yeah, right. I love
Here for that.
Same. So acknowledging that, a lot of people, a lot of us are in this world where there are a lot of things that are not pleasurable. There are a lot of uncomfortable, even painful things. Pleasure is important for just balancing that. You're not even necessarily needing to go above and beyond and go wild and way out there with your pleasure. You can even just use pleasure to balance the discomforts and the pains, if it feels too much to go really super far and ask for a lot, right?
Yeah. And what I find too in my work, which is around money. So listen, the connection between sex and money is so juicy, and where a lot of the hangups that culturally and just for people, just whatever we have around sex, a lot of the times there's something really mirrored in money. And so one of the things I notice too is women who have a really low capacity for pleasure are usually really disconnected from their desires. And the thing about desire that's so magical for making more money is like when you're on the path of like the truth of like really, really what your heart wants, it's like that's the place where all the co-creation exists. Like that's the place where the universe just puts the right people to introduce, where the opportunities are just there, where, you know, like where the money just flows. And it's like when we're off of that, sometimes it can really feel like a lot of hustle and grind and push and strive and struggle. But it's like, so knowing, like, I feel like pleasure and desire, it's kind of like, you know, that internal feedback loop.
Yeah. And it's so amazing how, as you say that, and I know you're speaking from a place of like, you're talking about money and what you desire to do with your money. Every word you just said, also, like, you could say the same exact thing for sex, where a lot of my clients are sort of disconnected from from desire. They'll say, I'm not even sure what I want, honestly. You know, like I know I want my sex to be more pleasurable, or I know I want to orgasm, or I want to orgasm more, or like feel bigger ones. And as we do our work, I'm like, okay, well, a lot of, you know, enhancing your orgasm is mental. And so what is it that, you know, really turns you on and gets you going? And they'll have like maybe a couple things, you know, oh, like, you know, my husband turns me on, or like a good erotic novel turns me on. But they don't really have an internal sense of like, me, I am really into X, Y, or Z. And a lot of people are scared to dig into that, because what if they find an X, Y, or Z that they're like not supposed to have? And what if they're deviant? You know, what they want is bad? And I'm gonna tell, like, if what you want doesn't hurt anyone, it's just, it might be different, but it's not bad if it doesn't hurt anyone, you know?
And I mean, I'll speak from my own experience here. I did many years of Catholic school, like many, many years of Catholic school. And so even though I don't even know where I'm going with this, other than like the idea of having my own desires was so weird to me until I was like well into adulthood.
Yeah.
Like I'm about to be 40. I would even say like within the last handful of years, the idea that like, oh, some of like this isn't wrong and bad, and I'm probably not going to burn in hell. Like, I don't know, the whole thing,
Yeah, yeah.
because it just sits so deep in the subconscious when you learn it from such a really young age. And so the levels of resistance around pleasure, it's just, for me, it took unwinding. Like there was like many layers of unwinding. It wasn't just like a thing that I was like, oh, I'm just going to be like this super sexy goddess. It was like, there's a goddess.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it transforms into so many, you know, for different people, that same or similar experience. You know, I did a little bit of Catholic school, not a lot of it. It wasn't like something my family like super made us like do a lot of, but we did some of it. So the influence was definitely there. And even outside of that, you know, our American culture is very influenced by, you know, Christian ideas. And so we all kind of get little tastes of it, no matter whether we're going to church or not. And that experience turns into things like, well, who am I to ask for pleasure? Who am I to ask for what I want in the bedroom? Who am I to even have wants in the bedroom? You know, my job is just to show up for my partner, and their pleasure is the important thing. I got to keep them happy. And, you know, things like that, and feeling guilty about, maybe you do have an idea of what kind of pleasures you want, and you're like, oh, I'm not supposed to ask for that. Like, that's selfish, you know, that's asking a lot.
Yeah, that also comes up in people's money all the time. People are afraid to ask for raises, afraid to ask for like working accommodations, flexibility, afraid to. Sometimes I'll even have clients who own their own businesses who are very successful, and they will be like feeling so guilty about working odd hours.
Yeah.
Like they're like, well, you know, I didn't work from 9 to 5 today. And I'm like, yeah, right. Like, which is interesting because when I started, also when I started my own thing, I would go to my office from 9 to 5, and I was like, that's so weird. I play, you know, I would be like watching cat videos in my office the last hour of the day, and I was like, I could just go home. Nobody's
You
like,
could. Yeah.
but I think it's the same sort of thing. It's where it's like, if you're afraid to ask for what you want in your bedroom, asking for what you want in the rest of your life, you know,
Yes.
it's like if you can do it there, one place or the other, it's the skill is transferable.
It is, it totally is, and I'll be honest with you, the evidence of that, especially since starting to work with you, I myself obviously, like, have always been very sexually open because I was reading the books at an early age and always talking about it. But obviously I started working with you for a reason, right? I had money blocks that I wanted to break through. So I didn't have any pleasure blocks. I love me some pleasure, but I did have money blocks. And once we started talking and working together, I was like, oh, let me open this door. And once I let that understanding kind of start working its way into my work with clients, almost every client I've had since starting to work with you has either started her own business or switched to a better paying job with people that respected her more, or like already had a business that was kind of like part-time and it was and by really leaning into her pleasure and really defining what she wants in the bedroom, it got really easy, really clear to see what she wanted out of the bedroom. And she was like, oh, this is what I want. I want my business to be full time and I want to quit this job. And she did it. And she's doing great because she's just like charged up and leaning into pleasure every step of every day. It's amazing how much connection there is there. Yeah.
Oh, that makes me feel so happy. I love that. And
Yeah.
and we could talk about this too. What I also notice is people's capacity for money really has a huge, huge amount to do with how much intensity, like feelings of intensity that they can hold in their body. So much the work that I do with my clients is around like, I call it emotional range, but it's the ability to be with really intense sensations and like be okay. Or like if you're making a sales call, you might get a rejection sandwich, or if you're putting a big launch out there, like you might face a disappointment or something like super delicious, like everything, something going viral and a zillion people finding out. Although actually that's also super, super intense. And so one of the things that I love that you talk about is just like, there's a connection there. Let's uncover it. Let's talk
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. I completely agree. I mentioned your concept of emotional range to someone yesterday I was talking to. I was like, I already knew that I was capable of intense emotions. And then stepping into this territory of admitting that I had money blocks was itself an intense emotion, right?
Oh
And then
yeah.
like doing the work of unpacking where all that came from and what moving forward looks like. It's been an intensely emotional journey the whole way. But for for a lot of my clients who are trying to get more comfortable with pleasure, but are feeling very intensely about like, oh, but what if this? But what is, because it's so hard to imagine getting rejected if you share what you really want with a partner, for example. You're like, this is what I really want. And like, what if your partner thinks that's weird? What if your partner doesn't want to do it too? What if it kind of scares them, or like really turns them off and changes the way they see you? There's all these really big emotions around that, right? And so some of what I'll do is I'll go, okay, we're going to do like itty bitty baby steps. We're going to take it one little step at a time. And we're going to sort of like make a plan in advance for failure. What is, I like to call it in the sex ed community, we call it aftercare. When you do an intense, sexy thing with someone, you can plan ahead of time. What are we going to do after this experience to make sure that we both feel safe, cared for, loved, respected? If things went in an unexpected direction, what's our aftercare plan for that? So I make an aftercare plan with my clients. Like, you're going to make a small ask. You're not going to ask maybe for the entire thing you want immediately. We're going to test it out. We're going to tiptoe in, make a small ask in that direction, and let's make an aftercare plan for what happens if your partner says no, right?
Yeah. All right. That's real good. And I love the parallels, because sometimes when I'm working with people on like sales or something, they're like so afraid that they're going to be rejected. And if you're doing sales, like it's it's happening. Nobody's closing 100% of their sales.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure I'm sure it's happened for people, but you've eaten a rejection sandwich
Oh, I've
along the
eaten
way.
so many.
Yeah. And it's like, when you can be with that sensation in your body, it moves so quickly. But when you're unwilling to experience something, it bothers you forever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to just equate this to sales real quick, but it's so
Yeah, dude.
when a couple of years ago, I was really working on like increasing my sales and making more money and being bigger and doing all this work. And I was so afraid to feel rejection that if somebody rejected me on a sales call, like if I would one take it personal, I would feel personally rejected, which is like its own little mental, bag of crap. But what I would do is I would mentally bicker with this person for like days, maybe weeks, because like the rejection would be right there for me to be with and experience. But I would be so against being like letting that rejection move through me that I would just like waste so much energy in there. And once I was like, all right, well, let's just practice feeling rejected. What I notice is like when I feel rejected, it hits me kind of in the belly. I'll feel like a tightening, like a little clamp. It kind of flushes up against my chest, my face, like again, like flushes hot. And within like less than 2 minutes, that rejection is done, and I'm like ready to carry on with my day. And so I love that you're saying this because the fear, I'm sure that the fear, especially when you're like, it's not just like a sales conversation you're putting at risk, but it's like your relationship, your core, most intimate relationships, that level of intensity is just super vulnerable and intimate for people. And I love that you said that you put together like a whole plan of like aftercare for that.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's really how we stretch our capacity. Because it's like, just because you ask for something doesn't mean that like it's guaranteed to happen or it's guaranteed to happen that time. Like every time we want to grow and expand, like failure's on the table, like that chip is on the table.
And it's easier to take bigger leaps with sex and money if you know that there's a safe, maybe not a comfortable, but a safe landing pad on the other side if it goes wrong, So having like, being able to take a financial risk, you're going to be able to take a bigger financial risk if you know that if all goes wrong, it'll suck, but you're not going to be completely ruined and in a really bad spot. So the same with sex, knowing that there's a safe, maybe not great, maybe not ideal landing spot on the other side, or it's not devastating to your relationship where you're going to be able to come back together, makes it easier to take bigger, like sexual, out of comfort zone steps.
Yes. And I think the ability to hold oneself, like the ability to like kind of like self-soothe and take care of yourself and relax, like relax your own nervous system is something that we need in in pursuing any flavor of success, whether or not it's like financial success, sexual success, like whatever it is we're going for. I think once you know you've got yourself, you have so much more freedom to take risk. Like once you're like, all right, yeah, well, if I eat this rejection sandwich, it's not going to be the first, it won't be the last, I'll be all right. And like, I like basically I could take care of myself. Like I could hold myself through this.
Yeah, absolutely. So much of my work is sharing sensual self-soothing and sensual self-care techniques. So much so that one of my more popular resources that I give out is my sensual activation guide, which if you get the 7-day version, it just gives you a 5-minute activity to do every day, 7 days in a row. It's just 7 different sensual self-care activities that help you decompress from a world that can sometimes be very not sexy, and then also help you feel like you're personal, regardless of everyone else, just you as an individual, feel into your individual sensuality and remind yourself that you have it within you to be sensual, feel sensual, do sensual things all on your own, and then you get to bring that to other people if you would like to, or to the world if you would like to, or as I'm discovering, to your work if you'd like to. You don't have to be overtly and appropriately sexual at work to bring your like sensual self to your work, and that can spark a lot of changes in people's work lives for sure.
Yeah, because to me it sounds also like embodiment. Like so many of the women that I talk to we're in a world that's really, really hyper over focuses and over values on like the masculine, the doing, the planning, the striving, the thinking, all the projective behaviors.
The thinking is so big. A lot of so much thinking. I like thinking. I love thinking. I also love being present with my body.
Yes. And that ability to move out, like to get your attention out of your head into your body is something that's so important in business and in money too, because that's where our intuition is. That's where you're going to get like that, like gut feeling that that guidance. And that's where all their power is too, is like in the present. Like sometimes when we're in our minds, we're actually not in the present. We're in the future. We're in the past. We might be in 3 places at once. We might be having a conversation, bouncing it off of things that have happened in the past and trying to keep an eye on where we're going in the future. And that split energy causes just so much like exhaustion for some people, or overwhelm. And it's like just learning how to drop into the body is one of those things where that clears itself up. You can like be in a present moment.
Yeah. That's also the secret to orgasm.
Oh,
So much struggle with orgasm is the brain is busy with thoughts of the past, or thoughts of other people, or thoughts of, am I going to come, like future thoughts. And the secret to orgasm is actually just what I call being like radically present with your body and the pleasurable thing it's experiencing, and just really, really being with that pleasure and experiencing it and noticing it again and again and again in the present as it unfolds, you know. and that's it's hard. I know as I say it, it sounds like people are like, how do you do that? It is a process. That's why orgasm coaching exists, but that is really the secret to it.
yeah, to learn to drop into your body. And I find that even with clients where we're not working on anything quite as intimate, learning to drop into your body does take some practice, especially if you have a lot of old feelings that are just stored there, you know,
Yeah.
stuff that just has come up. So what are some ways that, like, so let's just say we're blowing somebody's mind right now. They've never even considered that pleasure was important for their overall well-being, or like it's got anything to do with money, wealth, the capacity for that. What are some ways that somebody could just kind of like dip their toe into the water of increasing pleasure in their life?
Yeah. The easiest way, especially if you're someone who's like super busy and doesn't have a whole lot of time, is to, and this is something you do with money as well, is to just start noticing and appreciating pleasure throughout your day. So for example, if you wake up in the morning and you're noticing, oh, I got like a really good night's sleep, just notice that for a moment and go, my muscles feel relaxed. You know, my body feels really sunk into this bed. That's nice. And I know I'm going to have to leave in a moment, but that's future. In the present, being like really sunk into these pillows and sheets feels really good. And the temperature's perfect. And my mind feels clear. This is delightful. Okay, now I'm going to get out of bed. I'm going to give you all a gift. I once read because I was a nerd who read everything I could read about sex when I was young. I early in life read about, there's an orgasmic disorder where people orgasm almost too easily. In one woman's case, she couldn't not orgasm when she was brushing her teeth. The stimulation of the bristles of the toothbrush on her gums would make her orgasm. And it was actually distressing for her because she couldn't not do it, and it would distract from her morning routine. So she just like switched to a different method of oral care that didn't use toothbrushes, because she was just like, I can't keep doing this. And so now for me, every time I brush my teeth, I get to think about like, oh my God, these bristles against my gums. For one woman, this is orgasmic, you know? And so things like that, just kind of like noticing sensations. And I encourage clients as well, because some people are really have a hard time with sensual pleasure because there's so much guilt and shame wrapped around it. So things like the scent of your coffee is pleasurable. The beautiful view, that you might have either from your home or from your workplace or along your morning commute, like appreciating beautiful views. Appreciating, I'll play, if I'm having a morning where I'm like, I'm not sure if this morning is starting off the way I want, I'll purposefully play some of my favorite songs from like the 90s, because I'm just like, yeah, there we go. Like, that's pleasurable. I like hearing those sounds. And so just noticing pleasure throughout your day, or choosing the more pleasurable thing. I, at one point, decided I no longer listen to the news in the morning. It's just not the way I want to start my day. So that's a later in the day thing. I start my morning with either podcasts that personally titillate and make me feel good and fun. I like the Dan Savage Lovecast sex advice one. That's a really good one. And then yours, I listen to this podcast all the time because you delight me. And then, yeah, so as your day goes on, sometimes it's easy, you get that afternoon slump. So noticing like, I'm feeling great, and kind of like looking around for the pleasure, like, okay, well, I can adjust the seat of my office chair to feel more pleasurable for me, or I could even leave, if you work from home, you can like leave your office chair and, sit on a couch or a bed that feels more comfortable and just be like, I'm going to do this now. It feels more pleasurable for me. Notice if you enjoy cooking, noticing the pleasure of cooking that food, smelling it, tasting it. I love the pleasure of tasting good food or good drinks and like it moving into the body. Oh, that's such a good practice.
Yes, that's I'm going to tell everybody a little story. So I met Sex Coach Shannon. I did a retreat for my clients in New Orleans, and we were doing a pleasure mapping class with her. Like before she worked with me, I hired her to run this whole, class. And what was funny is that the day before we got there, we went out for oysters. I was with some of the ladies and we went out for oysters in New Orleans. Now, if you've never been to New Orleans, they are doing things with butter down south that we just do not do up north. We just don't do these things with butter. So basically, we went to this restaurant and there's charbroiled oysters, and they're like in this hot red butter sauce that's honestly, the shrimp, the oysters were like a vehicle to get more butter into your face. Like they could have put anything into this butter. I don't. And,
Butter is pleasure.
yes, and I was eating these oysters, and I'm like getting like this like bright red butter all over my face because there's like it's like seafood. This is, you gotta like kind of pull it apart, and I like get my oyster ready. One of my clients like squeezes the lemon, like a little drop of lemon. She's like, "You need one more drop," and I was like, "Okay." And we're doing this, and I was like, "Oh my word!" It was so good. And another lady across the table was like, "You're like covered in butter," and I was like, "I know. I'll take care of it when I'm like one thing at a time. Like I'm just gonna be covered in butter for a second."
Thank you.
Yeah, and what was so funny was when we were at the pleasure mapping class, and now we're like a day forward. My clients that were out to dinner with me were like, "Dude, like you enjoyed the ever loving shit out of that like seafood," and it was like we're so attracted to watching people in pleasure, like that. It came up like my like disgusting oyster covered like butter sauce face. People were like, "Yeah, that was like you were having a time."
It was kind of hot, maybe even, like, wow.
And well, so anyways, I'm sharing that. But when we were in the class, what did you give us? You gave us blueberries.
You could choose between a blueberry or a raisin. Yeah.
And so look, she gave us this little activity where we like touched the blueberry and we kind of like smelled it, or a raisin, and then like you put it in your mouth, but you don't eat it just yet. And it's like I've eaten blueberries 1,000 times, maybe more in my life. And the way that when you're really focused on it, the amount of like joy that one could extract from a blueberry, I've never really considered. Like I've never really considered how much like pleasure there is in a single blueberry. But when we were doing this class, I was like, all right, well, like you touch the blueberry and you're like, oh, okay, it's great. And then you like put it in your mouth and you're waiting for a second and then you eat it, but like you bite into it, but you don't chew it just yet. And it's like, when you're really, really present with it, it expands into something that's so much bigger than just like eating a blueberry.
Yeah.
The oyster story had nothing to do with this. I just wanted to paint you all.
It did because eating, feeding ourselves. Here's a good, why is pleasure important? It's the same. It's as important as eating. It is feeding yourself. It's feeding your well-being. It is fueling you and all the things you do, and at its best, it's maintaining you. Pleasure maintains you, the pleasure of eating delicious food and really, really actually tasting each bite and really feeling into the pleasure of it becoming a part of you as it moves into your body, right?
So good. Yeah.
That pleasure is, it might not give you like a physical energy the way food does, but it does give you energy. It does make your day a lot easier if you notice that pleasure and lean into it. And if you really lean into it and you start moving toward pleasure in an intentional way and start thinking about, well, what do I want? What pleasures do I want in my life? Then you can really start to kind of like increase and move into a life where pleasure more than just balances, the discomforts and the pains and the inconveniences. And you start to feel like charged up and ready to go,
Yeah. And I think when we're in a life that's like a little void of pleasure, everything seems like, even the best of things seems like a pain in the ass. Like I've definitely been in situations where I've been in beautiful landscapes, eating wonderful food with the sun hitting just right, and having company that's like, it's too hot here. And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right. Or like you're on your way to paradise and somebody's, just so much more willing to like be critical with the line, or like I feel like
Oh yeah.
when there's an adequate amount of pleasure running through your system, to me there's just like a softness and openness, like a patience, a kindness that just kind of also comes through. But like when we're like so tight and devoid of pleasure, it's like you can eat the exact same thing and one person could have like the most awesome experience with a blueberry that there ever was, and somebody else is like, oh.
Yeah. I mean, think about meals you've eaten that you like hardly even remember eating, or let alone tasting. Like the meals that you just like, yep, eating a meal to get through. I'm supposed to eat, or else I'll be grumpy later. So I'm gonna put food in my mouth and move on. And you like hardly even taste it, and there's no joy in it at all. And compare that to being like, I'm just gonna take like 1 extra minute to actually taste my food. And what a better afternoon you're gonna have if that's how you approach lunch. Even if lunch is a granola bar,
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I love that. Totally with you. All right. So that seems like a really easy way to get way more pleasure into the day. So it sounds to me just to like really take a moment, be present with it, use all of your senses, like taste, smell, touch, like, whatever your music. Is there another sense? I forgot one. I'm the worst. It's all right.
Oh, vision, like seeing.
Oh yeah. Beautiful things. Okay.
Aesthetically pretty things. Yeah.
So that seems like a really easy place to get started, because it's really just a little shift in your awareness. It's not even like you were going to eat the lunch anyways.
Yeah.
And so then you can start to have more and more pleasure. And that seems really important. Beautiful. Oh, I love having this talk with you. Where can people get more Sex Coach Shannon in their lives? Where can people find you?
So my handle is Sex Coach Shannon on most platforms. I finally got on TikTok. I'm on TikTok now, but I'm also on Instagram, Facebook. I'm not as active as I used to be, but I am there. And there are links to my website, sexcoachshannon.com. There's a resources page there with a lot of resources. I would say I'm most active on Facebook these days if you're really feeling my stuff. I'm going to try and get more active on TikTok. And if you sign up for my email newsletter or download a resource, you will get emails from me with what I'm up to, what I'm doing, virtual classes I'm teaching, thoughts I'm having that I think will be helpful for integrating more pleasure, sensuality, and sexuality into your life and feeling more sexy day to day. So yeah, those are some options.
So people can they sign up for your email list from your resources page?
Yeah, resources page, or even just my website, sexcoachshannon.com.
All right, so we could go to sexcoachshannon.com, or if you find her on Instagram or on Facebook, I think the bio link would have the resources, and then you can get onto the email list from there. So that's super, super wonderful. All right, anything else that you want to share with us before we wrap this episode up?
Gosh, I don't know. I think just, to everyone listening, BRIE's awesome. BRIE's amazing. BRIE's life-changing. If you're thinking about BRIE, you should reach out to BRIE. Like,
valid.
I'm just 100% like a big BRIE fan. I'm a BRIE top fan. That's all I've got to say, I think.
Oh, thanks. Well, I'm a Shannon top fan, and I'm also a big fan of ladies having delicious lives. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's like the main thing.
Delicious, sexy, wealthy lives. That's what I want to see a world full of.
Yes.
Like deliciously sexy, wealthy women.
Deliciously sexy, wealthy women. I'm here for that. I love that. All right. So, actually, I'm going to share with you all. So my book is out for pre-order. So if you wanted to go to any place that books are sold, the name of the book is Cash Confident, A Practical Guide to Money Management for the Modern Woman. I hope I got all those words perfectly correct. It'll be very embarrassing if I have my book title wrong. But that's available for pre-order. The book actually comes out December 3rd, but you can go and, just get your name on the list so that way it'll be at your door. All right. So Shannon, thank you so much for being with us today. I appreciate it tremendously. I love you so. And everybody, thanks. I appreciate you. And I will talk to you next week.
Thank you. Love you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Cash Confident Podcast. Remember, knowledge alone isn't enough to build wealth. It's what you do with that knowledge that counts. And that's where the Cash Confident community comes in. Our community is where aspiring wealthy women gather together to master money and mindset and build exponential wealth. I invite you to join our community where women are cultivating a healthy relationship with money and living the life of their dreams. Visit www.cashconfident.com to learn more.